Siddharth was a Master of Engineering student at Cornell. Siddharth, your LinkedIn profile lists your background as being in analytics and economics. Was that operations research or CS or something?
No. What I did was slightly different. I did my bachelor's in chemical engineering, and then I also opted for master's in chemical engineering. But very quickly, I realized that I had better passion for analytics side. So what I did was I did almost 15 credits focusing on analytics and economics, and kind of dialed down on chemical engineering. So my degree was still in chemical engineering, but I chose more focus on analytics and economics.
Excellent. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Siddharth, to continue to tell your story. I'm sure that many of our students here, almost all of them, are going to be very interested to hear your story. And also, at the time that you graduated, you were also, I believe, an international student. And so it might be interesting if you're able to sort of touch a little bit on in terms of your experience in finding your first job. Siddharth is currently Data Analytic Associate at Facebook Global Operations in Seattle. And prior to that, he was a business analyst at Amazon, also in Seattle. And before that, he worked in data analytics as a consultant manager in New York, which I believe was his first job. As well. And he's got his master's degree from Cornell in, I believe, 2014. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So Siddharth, take it away. And again, I'm so glad that you were able to join us this evening.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mark. So just to give you a bit of background, I was born and raised in Mumbai, India, where I did my bachelor's in engineering, focusing on chemical engineering. During my later semesters, I realized that I'm a bit more passionate to focus more on economics and finance side of the engineering world. So I ended up joining one of the firm called Avalon Global Research as a market research analyst, focusing on some of the clients who were in petrochemical and mining and doing a lot of market research and analytics for them. That was kind of the first time I got a bit into the analytics world. And after that, I wanted to pursue my career ahead. That's why I went ahead to do master's from Cornell University. During my master's program, I deliberately took some courses in analytics and economics. As I mentioned, I was a bit more inclined to understand that part of the world as well. So during my coursework, I took some courses which gave me more introduction of different case studies and how application of data helps us make better decisions. That's where I started getting more and more inclined to go further in analytics direction rather than chemical engineering direction. So my master's program, I took basically more courses in analytics, and I also did my master's project focused on analytics. And during that time, I'm talking about 2013, during that time, there were not a lot of schools that offered master's or bachelor's program in data science or analytics. But in the industry, there was a huge demand in for analytics associates. So what ended up happening was there were a lot of management consulting companies like McKinsey, Bains, Oliver Wyman, EXL, PwC. A lot of those analytics and management consulting firms, they were coming on campus to pick up a lot of master's candidates who were having good problem solving skills, and they were not focusing on specific discipline. So through on-campus placement, where Mark helped me as well, through on-campus placement, I was able to get a job at a company called EXL, which is one of the analytics, one of the leading analytics consulting firm in banking and insurance industry. So through them, I worked at American Express, which was my client, and I worked there for almost 3 years in New York City. During my 3 years at American Express, I really enjoyed my time in analytics, and that was my first professional analytics role. During that time, I worked on different projects focusing on a lot of consumer cards offers, doing a lot of A/B testing for them, trying to do some strategy through analytics on, how we want to advertise certain campaign, how we want to offer certain segment of customers. So did a lot of analytics work there. After that, my wife got a job. She's a software developer. She got a job at Microsoft Seattle. So because she had to move to Seattle, I started searching for roles in Seattle. And one fun fact, one good fact that I want to share this students here is, when I started searching for roles in Seattle for analytics, I was astonished that almost every single company that you can think of had analytics roles available. May it be Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, DocuSign, Expedia, name the domain, name the company, every company had analytics roles available. So I was really happy with that. That was the first time I realized the amount of demand this industry had. And I was fortunate to convert multiple interviews and eventually accepting a role as a business analyst at Amazon. So then I moved to Seattle and I worked at Amazon for a couple of years, where my focus was mainly on optimizing some of the transportation network of USA by analyzing a lot of data, doing a lot of simulations and building models. After that, spending a couple of years at Amazon was really, helped me a lot in me professionally as well. And the amount of data the company had was astonishing. During that time, around 3 years back, Facebook was growing a lot in the Seattle area. And I was always keen to learn more about social media analytics as well. So that's where I applied and I got a role as data analyst at Facebook. And since then, I've been with Facebook for almost 2.5 years now. And throughout, I've been in analytics profile itself. And here at Facebook, my role is mainly focusing on how we can take down bad content, bad advertisement, bad posts from the platform through machine learning models and doing data analytics and optimization. So this has been my journey so far. Specific to your question, Mark, so I do come from, I was an international student, and when I wanted to get a job, it was a requirement for me to get a work visa. And one of the things that I found helpful in this industry is most of the roles that I'm aware of in the big companies, they do offer H-1B visa. So if you are an international student and looking to grow career in data analytics, there are so many companies that offers work visa. So that was taken care of by my employers. Yeah, that was my journey so far. And honestly, I truly love data analytics as a whole, the way application of data helps us make decisions. And I've worked across finance, retail, and now social media domain. So it's not just one domain, but so many big domains has potential for huge demand for data analytics. So definitely, if you are looking to start your career in this domain, this is like definitely one of the upcoming and booming domain to work in.
So Siddharth, a quick question in terms of what is it that you really enjoy about the role that you're in, and what maybe you maybe not enjoy as much?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So the thing that I really enjoy is the amount of decisions we can make purely through analyzing data and the amount of insights data can give you. So a lot of times, so many new patterns, so many new decisions, so many things are uncovered through going deep down into the data. So just helping leadership make those decisions, influencing them through the power of data is something I truly love. In terms of what I don't like or find it more challenging is there are so many times I've found throughout my 7 to 8 years of journeying data analytics is we don't have good data, or we are just missing data, and still we have to make good decisions. So as we move as a senior IC or as a manager, a lot of time, even as a data analyst, we face this issue that we need to uncover something, but we don't have enough data to uncover it. But still, we need to make right decisions for our team and for our company. So that has been definitely a big challenge for me. And one more thing that I found challenging was because I did not do a dedicated bachelor's or master's in data science or data analytics, I had to learn so many things on job, which was a bit of a struggle, especially at the start of my career. I honestly would have loved to do a dedicated master's or bachelor's in data science or data analytics. That would have really helped me, apply some of the theories and case studies in my professional world. So that was definitely a big challenge at the start of my career.
Okay, Mark, are we going to the next person and then questions, or?
Do you have a preference?
No, maybe we can hold the questions till the end,
Okay.
and that way.
Give everybody a chance to sort of tell their stories.
Right, because some of the questions may overlap and they want to ask the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, our next panelist is Byu, and Byu actually just transitioned to a startup, still kind of in the data science realm, but I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about that. Before that, she worked at Google, and she is an alumnus of the Applied Math and Statistics program. And I'll let her do a further introduction.
Yeah, hi. Excited to be here today. And I realized my bio is really long, but just to introduce myself, I was born and raised in Thailand, so I'm also was an international student at my time at Hopkins. Like Sonjala said, I got my degree, both my bachelor's and master's at Hopkins, so big Blue Jays fan. And from after school, I got my first role as a data scientist at Oracle Data Cloud based in Colorado. And my decision to take that role was pretty much not a coin toss, but I was looking at multiple roles because I got my applied math and stats degree, and I realized that's it's a very flexible, I guess, degree, right? Everyone wants people who are analytical minded and who can code, who can do who understand statistics. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I applied to all the jobs you could imagine on Handshake. I don't know if you guys still use Handshake or other platforms. I'm sure I applied to like 50 jobs for sure. Especially as an international student, some jobs don't sponsor. So my search was pretty wide. I casted my net pretty wide, but fortunate enough, I got some job offers and decided to go into data science at Oracle. I stayed there for a couple years. I joined as a rotational data scientist where we went through all types of data science work. I joined an more like analytics team for a while, also R&D, did some web development as well, even though that's a little bit outside of the data science realm. So I really enjoyed that. But through that, I realized that, I love making decisions with data. I love data science, but I don't see myself as, creating data science models and doing analysis like all day. But I do want to, enable people to do that. And, also be able to, explain data science to non-technical customers. Like that's kind of what I enjoyed. So I moved on to my next role as a analytical program manager at Google, which, I was on the data science team, but I did a lot of prioritizing our work, writing technical specs and making sure that we, get work done. Whereas, I'm not handling all the work myself, but I just make sure that we're delivering the right products. And most recently, I transitioned to a product manager role at a startup. It's a company called Windfall, and we are a data company. So, still within the data science realm, but I'm transitioning my role to be more strategic and understanding what products we should build for our users. So yeah, that's where I am now. I just started with my role last week. So, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding looking for roles as a international student, as well as roles that are tangentially related to data science, but not actual, data science work. I'm happy to talk through that because I've, thought through every type of role in my few years here. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and next we have Andrew Hawkins. Andrew, also an alumnus of Johns Hopkins University, Applied Mathematics and Statistics, is now a senior data science at the Chemours company. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. Andrew, welcome, and can you please introduce yourself?
Certainly, yeah. Nice to be here tonight. Thanks for having me on, actually. This will be fun, I think. So my background kind of changed quite a bit. I started out, still in a STEM field, but as an undergrad, I started out in aerospace engineering, actually. I went to a small college in Florida that was it's kind of specific for aerospace, like everything in kind of the aerospace field. But once I got into more of the math stuff, I enjoyed it a little bit more, So I liked the numerical analysis and differential equation stuff a little bit more. So I kind of moved my way over to a more computational mathematics degree. Well, it was computational mathematics, actually. And after graduating undergrad, it kind of just fell in my lap, data science. I think back then it wasn't like a major role, or it wasn't, as big as it is now, at least. And a friend of mine that I went to school in my undergrad, he was an operations manager at a local manufacturing company. A small manufacturing company. They mainly made generics of chemical stuff. So they made sunscreen and lip balm and things like the stuff you'd find at CVS. They're branded stuff. And they were looking to do some forecasting around their demand. So I had some background and knowledge in time series and things that would relate to that. So kind of fell in nicely into that niche of manufacturing. I got to do a little bit more on the actual manufacturing side outside of their demand forecasting with a lot of their process optimization and yield improvement opportunities. But my goal was always kind of to go to grad school. So I think I spent maybe about a year there. And then I came up to Baltimore, and that's when I came to Hopkins. After Hopkins, I stayed in the area. I actually got my first job after Hopkins was at Stanley Black & Decker, which kind of fell nicely into the niche that I had already, created for myself, or accidentally created, which was manufacturing. They were looking to staff their what's called Industry 4.0 team. So just Industry 4.0 being the fourth industrial revolution. The next step after really the automation of manufacturing. So that's, doing optimization, doing data science and whatnot in the plant. So there, I got to do a lot of that work, which was quite fun. I think maybe being an industrial data scientist, it's a little, it seems like I've never had the experience at a tech company, but it seems to be quite different. A lot of the work is it's harder to justify. You gotta really justify it to the company. They really, those big companies like that, they really like to see the bottom line over anything else. So justifying is like such a major thing, and that's not necessarily something that I like very much. Reporting to the business and trying to do those kinds of things. But But I spent a few years at Stanley Black & Decker. If you don't know, they're a discrete manufacturer. They make a lot of tools. They have the DeWalt brand, in which they have a lot of power tools, and they have a lot of hand tools as well. So all discrete manufacturing, like parts and things and motors and whatnot. Spent a few years there, and then I got a job at the Chemours company, which the Chemours company, I mean, I think I should probably explain it. It's a spin-off of DuPont. So they're a chemical manufacturer. They actually took, during the spin-off, it was the spin-off when they spun off Dow, and DuPont became its own company again, and Chemours became a company. But they took their fluorochemicals, fluoroproducts, and titanium technologies business. So they make like Freon and Opteon, which they make all sorts of different refrigerants. Opteon is kind of the global warming, the lesser global warming Freon. So it's like doesn't bind with O3 and ozone. So so that's kind of what they do. They also have the titanium technologies business, which is it's a titanium dioxide which goes into things to make it opaque. So pretty much everything is opaque. Anything that's white goes into lots of paints, things like that. So I kind of made a transition from doing data science in a discrete manufacturing to this continuous manufacturing, which is kind of what chemical manufacturing generally is. So that was kind of a big jump for me, but still a lot of the same ideas from time series were some of the main points that are main, analysis routes that we would use. A lot more data from a continuous, continuous manufacturing type of setting. We usually have process variables that have, that are sampled pretty high frequency, as opposed to the other, discrete manufacturing, which is more batch and lower frequency sampling of things that at least would be relevant to what we'd want to analyze or model or whatever. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at now. I've been working at Chemours for about a year and a half, maybe. So my position is actually officially remote. So when going remote over the past year, it didn't actually affect me all that much. So that's actually kind of nice. We have a pretty small team too. So that's another thing that might be different in industrial data science versus, a tech company's data science. We have a very small team. And usually individuals are embedded into operations. So instead of collaborating with other data scientists, it's more likely that I'd collaborate with, a process engineer or a chemist or someone at the plant site, as opposed to another data scientist. Although we do collaborate, every once in a while. My team is, just for reference, my team is, we have 3 data scientists that kind of service the whole company. So yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Okay. All right. So now we can open it up to questions from the audience. And we do have a few questions that were already submitted in the chat, but I welcome you to just turn on your mic and speak your truth. So one question is, in general, like how many hours per week do data analysts work? It's the easy one.
I mean, data analytics is a full-time job, so you have to work, 40, 45 hours. That's like the norm. But there are some weeks where, some escalations come, or, for example, when I was working at Amazon during November and December, where the peak time for Amazon's business. So during that time, we had to put in like, 50 hours or sometimes 60 hours. So definitely depends on, seasonality, but overall, it's a full-time job. So you are working like good 40, 45 hours a week for sure.
Yeah, I would say that's true for me too. I mean, my hours are, the usual, they're actually pretty flexible for the most part, but sometimes I have to say travel to a plant site or do things like that, which kind of increases the amount of time that, I'm working, I guess. But for the most part, it's pretty standard. Nothing like a lot of the finance folks or, people at hedge funds or something.
Yeah, I'd say that I'd agree that it's like varies depending on your role, your season, or or even your project. So one thing to consider as well, I guess, when you're looking for a role is like how much do you value work-life balance, right? And that might determine what industry or what type of company you might want to apply for for a job. So like obviously, like I'm now in a startup and that might require more hours and that might not be for everyone. So I consider that for sure if you're planning to find your first role.
Okay, well, so all right. So what kind of tool sets did you need to learn to work in data science? And I'll call on you next, Rob. Thanks for the hand raise.
So a lot of the data sets I work with are time series. So I mean, having knowledge of time series is certainly important for most of the work that I do. I also do a lot of work that would, I guess, kind of be considered operations research. So I do also a lot of optimization. We do process modeling too. So, general things in machine learning are also good things to have, knowledge of. And then of course there are the less, academic things and more, programming and knowing pandas well and things like that. So knowing how to manipulate data. Honestly, for me, a lot of the data, even that you'd think maybe, we have sensor data, it should be pretty good, but these sensors break, they foul, they have varying variance over time because they degrade. So a lot of times we have to be able to handle bad data. And that's almost one of the biggest tasks is how we're going to handle that data. Yeah, I mean, that's understanding, the challenge of data processing is certainly a big thing outside of, the general knowledge that you need from statistics and machine learning and whatnot. That's for data science, at least.
Anything else to add?
I can just add from my experience, a lot of the tools also depend on the company that you're working with. So when I was in banking sector, credit card industry, that time we were using SAS, which is statistical analytics system. Then at Amazon, it was more focused on SQL and Tableau. And here at Facebook, it's combination of SQL, Python, and some of the in-house tools that Facebook has. But fundamentally, as Andrew mentioned, some of the concepts of statistics, time series forecasting, and all those things are going to be foundational, independent of which tools do you use.
Yeah, I think maybe I'd add from another perspective is, a lot of, I used to recruit and I review resumes and things like that. So obviously, like if you do know, the more like classic tool sets, right? Like Python, R, et cetera, obviously that's a plus, sometimes a requirement, right? But I'd make sure to, put everything that you know well. If some things you don't know well, like maybe not put it there, or maybe call out to your interviewers just because, we it does make a lot of difference if you know, if you're putting things that you don't really know well, right? Sometimes that's not maybe a great thing. So it's a different perspective, but for sure, like put what you know, but just be mindful of that.
Okay, and Rob, would you like to ask your question? Calamente?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for letting me ask a question. Thanks for the panelists for joining in and taking your time to answer our questions. I'm going to be graduating with a master's in applied and computational mathematics from JH in May. And so I've been on the job market, for a little while. And what I find common, I'm applying for data analyst roles. What I find common is positions and companies are looking more towards the projects that they give for the interview rather than the actual interview itself. And I guess I want to know, is there something specific? Obviously, they want to know like how well you can analyze data and get whatever you can out of the data. But I guess, are they looking specifically for something to convey within these projects? Just speaking from your experience, if you had an interview like that with a project.
I've done, when I interviewed, I did a lot of, projects as well. And I also reviewed projects while I was interviewing candidates as well. And I guess what I'm looking for, at least for my, I was in a rotational program where we want people who know statistics, but who can code, who knows math, but who can also like present their work. So what I look for is a lot of the candidates we have who pass our initial screening, like they know statistics, right? But like, do they really know how to present their work? And so like, if a candidate can't speak to what they did, that's kind of like a red flag to me. So I think that's, that's where you kind of, you try to pass that bar, right? But after that, I want to, kind of understand if there's anything that I haven't heard before, not from, something that me or my team wouldn't have thought of, but like if you've presented solutions that are different from other candidates, and that's kind of like hard, right? It's not because sometimes like you might think that the solution is like trivial and everyone's going to approach it this way, but I would approach every problem with like a open mind, and don't kind of like tunnel yourself into like this probably is the best solution, right? Like, and if the solution is you're like, hey, I walked through like 5 different approaches and then I still ended up with like the common solution, that's better than like not showing me your thought process, right? So at a high level, like show your thought process and know what you did really well, so then you can present it really well during your project review. Got it.
Thank you. In terms of, so my goal is to become a data scientist. So does it make sense this path that I'm going towards, data analyst to data scientist? Is that a common path that many people take?
I think so. Yeah. So we are. We don't have. Well, just to answer or make a comment about your previous question too. We have. We don't have like an additional screening project. We're actually considering putting one together, but when we interview folks, we, just as Byu was saying, we are really trying to understand the thought process. So if it's like a capstone or something that the candidate has done in school, we still want to know, or it isn't a professional coming in, say, we still want to know like how someone approached a problem. It's good to understand how did they frame it, and how did they approach it? What were some of the assumptions they made about, the problem, or, anything about it? It's pretty much what they would do. So I think maybe that project, which I've done projects too. I can't say I particularly like doing them because they, sometimes take quite a bit of time, but I think that's probably what they're getting at is how someone would approach that. And then for your second question, that's what we do. We have, I think at one point we actually had more interns than we had, full-time folks. That's because our team is new, but yeah, that's what we do. We have actually 3 tiers of I guess, job letter really. And, we have an analyst position, but we have an data engineering position, which I wouldn't expect to graduate to. There's not really much to graduate to, I guess, to a data science position, but I think it's pretty common, at least it would be for someone at our company, to go from an analyst role and then understanding, more about the process, more about things that are going on at the company, and learning all the while, to kind of move on to a data science role. I would definitely say I can't speak for other, companies, but I think in the industrial, data science setting, that's probably pretty common.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd
thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. I'd like to, I mostly agree with Andrew in terms of there's a lot of industries where you go from data analyst to data scientist as you get promoted. Although in a lot of maybe big tech, they're very different roles, and they're very different interviews. So, I think more about what do you like about data science, right? And if you want to dig into data and want to get some insights and explain that to the business, etc. Maybe data analyst is the route that is best for you. If you want to build very complex neural net models, for example, maybe you won't get to touch that as an analyst. So I think a bit more about what you want to get out of the data science role and see if it aligns better with data analyst or data science positions.
Got it. Yeah, I think I'm more looking towards using data to, solve business problems. So maybe data scientist is not totally the route, It, I guess, depends on the job and the company as well.
Sorry, I'm speaking a lot, but I did a lot of research when I was moving roles, right? Because I've had a few roles now. So depending on, the data science role, it depends from, it varies from company to company too. So I would reach out to your network if you know people who are a data scientist at Google, at Facebook. It's very different, right? So because I know even within Facebook, and Siddharth, you might know better, there's data science for product, right? And that's more analytical. And there's R&D core data science, which is very, very technical. So even within a company, it's very different. So there might be a data science role that you like, where it's more, close to the business. So I do some research on that.
Okay. Thanks again for your time.
One of the things that I did appreciate about all of you guys is that you're working in data science, but your roles don't actually say data science, right? It's you identify yourself as a data scientist. And so I really want to caution you guys, don't get so hung up sometimes on the titles. But like you were saying, look more at what they're doing with the roles and really dig in and talk to people. So what we're doing tonight with this panel, you can actually do with people that you find on LinkedIn, you can do a one-on-one. It's called an informational interview. So if you want to know more about how to do those and get started, you can talk to your life design educator. Now, there was another person that had their hand up, and I think they might have got weary or it timed out. Do you want to chime in, the other person who had their hand raised to ask a question? There you go.
Oh yeah, I think it kind of got answered. I think I was just wondering how much in your day-to-day software engineering best practices are involved, but I think you kind of answered the question, where depending on what I want to do, whether it needs to be more of a technical role versus a business side role. So I guess it kind of got answered through that. But yeah, that was my question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to grab another one from the queue here. Someone asked, do you find that you are doing more learning and growing your skills, or more application of the same algorithms and principles?
I mean, it kind of, there are a lot of different domains in the company that I work at. So a lot of things that I don't know. So I do often get the chance to kind of learn more about, a certain, certain analysis, or, maybe even it could be something more along the lines of the engineering side too. What's going on in the chemical side, what are the first principles around that? So I think depending on the role, again, it would definitely depend. As far as like just, scikit-learn galore, I don't, that's not something that I do. It's not like just, spam a bunch of different models and see. It's not auto ML. It's really not too much of what I do. A lot of it comes down to trying to understand the data a little bit better, which is where the engineering side comes in, including feature engineering, which, a lot of times we collaborate with actual engineers at a site or someone with domain experience, which I oftentimes don't. So, and a lot of times analysis can even be ad hoc. We have an engineer come to us and say, oh, we want to, I guess it'd be pretty much the equivalent of an A/B test, but it, like a statistical test on, we're going to run a training, which in engineering terms, they have things called Kaizen events where they would, kind of stop the process, do a training, change something about, what's going on. And then we want to see if it's better. Very similar to what an A/B test would do. So things like that can happen. But as far as like, I would probably never approach problems in the same way. It's usually kind of novel each time is what I'd say.
I'd like to add that that's a good question, Elizabeth, is because when I interview for jobs, I always ask people at that role, like, do you think you're learning, or are you like doing the same thing and you're teaching other people? So I think like I find a good a balance for me personally is like somewhere in the middle, right? Like if it's half and half, that's great, because like you're teaching someone, maybe you're doing the same stuff and you're mentoring someone who just started, and then but you're also like still learning and growing, because I feel like you never know everything, so there's always something to learn and grow. And for me, like that, maybe that's one of the reasons why I've moved from data science to like program management to product management, is that I do want to find more opportunities to learn and grow. And that might mean like maybe going really deep into like data science and like learning new algorithms, and that's what you want. Or maybe learning software skills so you can like maybe transition to like software engineering or data engineering roles. Or it could mean like maybe finding a new role that's within data science like realm, right? Like what I'm doing right now, I'm like a product manager for a data company. So depends on what you want to learn. You can always learn at your current role, or like another role that's similar but still like a lot different.
And just to add to that, I think it all depends on like what you want to do as well. I personally like to be always a bit outside of my comfort zone. So I try to take projects which I'm not 100% certain that I'll be able to, do it with ease. So I think it depends on you how much you want to focus on learning versus applying the existing knowledge that you have. And I encourage that you should always focus on learning more. As Byu mentioned, try taking different roles as well to see what type of things excite you. And also try to, if you're in bigger corporate as well, try to switch teams after certain times so that you always know different things that are happening in different domains or different business units within a corporate. So definitely it's based on your application of how you want to grow your career, but definitely learning should be prioritized as much as possible.
Okay, Skylar, I believe you have a mic.
Hello. Yes. My question for I guess whoever is up for answering it, or all of you, is what has factored into your decisions to move companies, maybe outside of just exactly what it is that you're working on. So I'm just kind of curious, what factors have gone into when you've changed companies, and I guess just kind of the context for that question is that after my undergrad, I started in a systems engineering role, and then moved, and then kind of after starting on my master's at Hopkins, moved into a data science role. So I'm doing things that I want to be doing, which is good. But when I graduate, it's like, okay, do I want to stay here for a long time, or switch companies or something like that. So just kind of curious to hear what has factored into your decisions to move companies.
I think this.
Good.
I just my I guess quick answer is like similar to my answer from the previous question, right? Just like, am I learning at this point? Or if I'm not, can I learn here? You know, as in like the same company, different role, or same role but different projects, or have I kind of like exhausted, you know, or has my learning been plateaued here, right? And my rule of thumb is like, let's say in a few years, I look at my resume and I'm like, okay, if I stay at this company at this role for another year, can I add another bullet point to my resume? If I cannot, then I'm like, okay, well, you know, I won't be learning anything big enough that I'm like proud of or can show, right? So that's kind of like my rule of thumb is like, if I can't add something new to my resume, I think it's time to move on to a new role or a new company.
Yeah, I have very similar thought process as well. I think learning is the biggest thing, and also curiosity. I think a lot of times what happens is if there is a company which is doing something that just excites you, or some of the roles that are there in that company that excites you more, that is also one of the factor to consider switching. And one more thing to consider is in a lot of big corporates, even if you want to switch team, a lot of times you have to go through interview process. So it's fundamentally like moving to a different team, different goal, and a lot of things are different. So a lot of times people, when they're interviewing for different teams within company, also consider interviewing outside. So that is also one more factor. And the last thing that I encourage a lot of you is if you are in the same company for a long time, even though you want to continue in the same company, just to make sure that you are very much aware of what type of interviewing skills you have. It's good to interview after a few years, even though you don't want to switch, just to make sure that you are always updated with the industry requirement, and you know that whenever you want to switch, you don't have to brush up a lot of things.
So I've only left 2 companies. The first one was to go to grad school, so that probably isn't a great example. But the second one, I left Stanley Black & Decker because I guess the role kind of changed. I mean, officially I was a data scientist, but I was doing a lot more software engineering than I would have liked to have been doing. So their needs changed as well. So their needs kind of morphed into how do we collect data? So we want to start collecting data from this process, or maybe it's not a process and we don't have anything automated to collect it now. So how are we going to collect that data? So we'd have a whole project to start collecting data from, say, forms or something like that. I remember the last project I did Stanley Black & Decker was around collecting safety data. So it was really just like near misses and things like that. It was pretty much just building a web application and then doing simple like statistical stuff on top of that data. So for me, it was just, I kind of, slowly drifted away from what my interests really were, which were more along the lines of, research, data science, or machine learning and things like that.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. Nikhil or Dave?
Hi guys, I'm Nikhil. I'm doing my master's in biomedical engineering, but my thesis is mostly in data science. And I just wanted to ask a question for the panel, but mostly Byu. And my question is regarding, I saw that you stated earlier that you switched from a big corporation to a startup. And I wanted to ask, how did you find the startup you decided to join? And what kind of factors did you look into when deciding to switch to a smaller company regarding growth and et cetera? Because I've been thinking about going more into the startup space and was wondering, how can I identify a company that I think is going to grow the most and where my effort will be the most appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I found this company through past coworkers who's moved on. They found the company through like someone reached out on LinkedIn, and then one of my best friends is now our director of engineering, but he was their third hire. And after a couple of years, he's like, "Hey, do you want to speak to our CEO? Do you want to see if there's like a role here for you?" So at that time, I just joined Google, and I was like, I'm not ready to move on yet. So I just joined the company. So and at that time, I knew I wanted to do product management. But they were, I was going to be their first product hire, and I actually am. But at that time, the CEO was like, "Hey, we want someone a little more senior to come in here because it's their first hire." Makes sense. And I wasn't ready to move on either. So it was about timing, right? But this year he reached back out and he's like, "Hey, like, let's do this." So I think a lot of it is connections. So like, taking calls with people, and, when your friends, move to a new role, like keep in touch. Cause I think, you never know when someone's going to reach out, right, to you to like give you a job or, ask you to come for an interview, for example. So for sure, like, connections and networking is important. In terms of, how I made that decision is that I worked at Oracle and I worked at Google. I'm like, okay, like, unless my goal is to go through all the big techs, I think I want to try something new. And I think now is the time to, like, for me in my career to, take risks, because, startup, like, there's no guaranteed like bonus or stocks or anything. And I think, like, now's the time that, work is, very important to me right now. Maybe in a couple of years, it might be something else, but I think it's the right time, and it's the right company. And I guess your other question was, how do you, know if the company's going well? So obviously, like, if do your due diligence, like look at any public records, if they have like Series A, Series B funding, that might be important if you care about going IPO soon with the company. And also a lot of it, my decision comes from meeting the people, because right now we're 30 something people. So I'll be working with everyone all the time. I'll know everyone really well. So if I don't get a good sense of who I'm going to be working with through the interview, and if I, don't, especially the CEO, like if I don't believe in his vision, that's a big red flag for me. Like, I was interviewing with another startup a couple months ago, and I really liked the company. It aligns with my values, like more than, maybe more so than this company, right? But it was like healthcare related, and I have healthcare, biomedical engineering background. I was like, this is perfect. I met the CEO and I was like, I don't think we can work well together. I don't think he listens to me, things like that. So for sure the people, but definitely if you don't think you're going to work well with the CEO, don't even like consider it. Hope that answers. I think it's a long answer, but hope that answers all your questions.
And Byu, Alexander, I see you, but there was a question kind of piggybacking on that. Someone, Mark Atanga asked, how your education and knowledge in data science is applicable to your role as product manager.
100% applicable. This is my first product role. And a lot of times I think there's another question about, like, do you think you could have gotten a data science role out of school? The answer is it's hard. It's possible. But I can come back to that later. But mainly, I had good conversations with the execs in this startup, and, I didn't have product background, but they took a chance because they're like, you have solid data science background. We want to take you in, and you seem like you're an analytical thinker, you can problem solve. So, they're like, we're going to take you in and we're going to mentor you on the product side, but like, because you have a solid data background, we're not worried about it. So definitely, like, my data science background helped me get this role like almost completely. But just to touch on the other question I touched on a little bit is, like, getting into product management out of school is possible. A lot of times though, in like big companies, it's very competitive and they want you to have like an internship. So if you can get an internship, or even like, even after graduating. That's very like important. But it is possible. It is a little harder because a lot of product managers come from software engineering background or data science background, and for like 5 to 10 years even before they jump into product management. So that's a route you can take or get a good internship.
Okay, thank you. And Alexander, thank you for being patient.
No problem. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your great answers so far. So I've been hearing a lot about how there's going to be a sort of transformation in the future in the way that data is being used. And I keep hearing that data is sort of this world of data is still in its infancy. I was sort of wondering like what trends you guys see and sort of how you think the role of data and its use will change going forward.
I think overall, a lot of companies are now investing a lot of money to get clean data because they understand that data-driven decisions are much more accurate than decisions based on your business sense or gut feeling. So overall, a lot of companies are investing a lot of money to build data centers, build their in-house analytics teams, and also overall focusing on logging more data. So with that in mind, I personally feel that this overall demand for analytics roles is going to continue booming at least for near future. That means next few years for sure. But too much in future, it's always very difficult to predict because it's a very fast moving industry. And just touching back to on a similar note, like almost 10 years back, if you look at what were the analytics roles available, there were data science role, some data analyst role, but a lot of times they're very generic roles. Now, if you look at industry, there are, as Byu mentioned, within data science also, there is business analytics, there is product analytics, those kind of roles are there. There is data engineering, machine learning, research science, applied science, data analyst, business analyst. So there's so many wide spectrum of roles that are available and they are also evolving. For example, analytics program manager is one of the newest addition that I see in last few years that has come up and has drawn a lot of talent. So it is evolving and I definitely see the industry having more and more demand in next few years for sure.
Yeah, I see the same thing too. I mean, I think really what it comes down to is the ability to make better decisions and make them faster, you know. Like for us, for us, it really comes down to money. So if we can make, say, a decision about when to clean a machine, in a sense that it won't break and we won't have unscheduled downtime, that's a pretty significant amount of time that we can continue producing the product that we want to produce. So I think, yeah, I mean, making those decisions, that's really what it comes down to. And now that we have computational power, galore with all the cloud providers and whatnot, it becomes a lot easier. Storage of data is super cheap now, so we can keep all of our high resolution data pretty much indefinitely, and use it whenever we need to. We have GPU clusters and things like that if we're going to do any hardcore neural network stuff. So I mean, everything is kind of opening up to, even though those technologies were kind of there, we now have better routes to using them, so which kind of feedback, it's the whole loop, now we can collect more and use it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Sonjala, you're on mute.
John, did you want to ask a question?
Sure, I'd love to. Sorry, I want to put my hand down, but I don't. Okay, there it is. Yeah, so I'm curious. Being a Johns Hopkins student, we're really lucky that has such a great reputation. I've been, lucky enough to get a few offers already being about to graduate. So I'm wondering, I actually have two questions. I'm wondering what's a reasonable amount of time to make, an employer wait to give them a decision. In my mind, it's like between a week or 2 weeks. Is that reasonable, or is that too long to make somebody wait? And then question two would be, my worst fear is I take a job I'm happy with, and then 2 weeks later, I get an offer for my dream job. So what are your feelings on leaving a job maybe a couple weeks or a couple months into it, or leaving a job before you even start it? Is that really frowned upon, or is it worth it?
I mean, I think if you feel like the job is going to, make you happier, I think it's worth it. I mean, I did it. So just to be honest, I had an offer from one company when I was making the transition from Stanley Black & Decker to Chemours, and I accepted the offer from the other company, and then I got this offer from Chemours, and I mean, I had to reject the other one after I had already accepted. It was kind of, it was embarrassing, but really what it came down to was I felt that the Chemours was, a better fit for me. And, I mean, it really wasn't that big of a deal when you think back on it. And it's not like they made a big deal out of it either. And then as far as the amount of time, I certainly think 2 weeks is okay. Trying to think back how long I waited for, it was probably about 2 weeks. I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations that you have potentially multiple offers. I agree with like 1 to 2 weeks is usually like standard, obviously depending on the company. And also if you do have, competing offers, you could, bring that up, or like waiting for another offer. I mean, if it's a competitive company, they might even, be better at negotiating, I guess, your salary, things like that. So use it to your advantage for sure, but don't prolong it too much. 1 to 2 weeks is fine. And in terms of like moving jobs, like I think, do what's best for you, like whatever you feel like, whichever job is a better fit for you. But I think about like, okay, like the job you're turning down, do you ever want to work for them ever again? Because it probably will not happen. But if it's a company that you're like, yeah, like I don't really like them anyways, then of course, like, take the other offer, because, if you're not even going to consider working for them in the future, then that's fine. So, but I'd keep that in mind, because, I don't know if they keep a list of people who did, rejected an offer, but it still does not look great.
Yeah, I don't want to get blacklisted at a great company.
For sure.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
So Sonjala, we've got a good number of questions still in the chat here. So I gave me a sense of where we left off.
Around the 7:55 mark.
Yeah. Okay. So
we can also cherry pick, like, because we probably won't get through all of them.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a question here for Byu. Do you think you would have been able to jump into a product management role right out of school?
I think we touched on that a bit, and I think, it's like my answer is it's difficult, but it's possible, especially if you are able to get internships like the year before you graduate or even earlier. But it is definitely possible. I actually saw like another question for me, and I want to touch on real quick before we jump. It's the MBA. Like if I consider, I guess, getting an MBA for product management, I know a lot of people do that. And a lot of the reason is because they, maybe we're not in tech and they want to transition into tech. So like I see MBA as transitioning industries and making connections. I think in my case, because I do have a master's, getting an MBA, a lot of mentors have told me like it's kind of redundant because I'm already in tech and I have a master's. So it would be more of just like, making the right connections to get my product management role is, maybe it's a better route than stopping, my life for 2 years to go get an MBA.
Very good. Okay, do you guys think, from Rick Hewitt, do you think government regulation of cyberspace / machine learning and such will impact the industry in the coming decade?
I think some of the government regulations and how they will impact industry is very difficult to predict. Definitely, we see that a lot of big corporates are making different data decisions, different encryption decisions based on government regulations. But it's very difficult for me to predict how it will impact the industry in next decade.
And another one is, do you think it's helpful to know full stack languages for data science?
I do, yeah. I mean, primarily use Python, but usually as like I guess I would consider myself a data science generalist. We oftentimes are building a data product or something that is going to have a long-term use by the company. So usually we're going to build a product with whatever analysis we end up coming up with. So usually we'll expose the results with a REST API. And then oftentimes, depending on who is going to be the consumer of it, it'll be, maybe some business intelligence kind of front end, but more preferably in my personally, would be just to build a front end for it. So yeah, I think that, knowing maybe some JavaScript and something for the front end is probably a good idea. And I guess in the sense of, knowing how to do visualization just as like a general concept, how do we visually depict data the best way is probably also a pretty good thing too.
All right, thank you. So we got a question about the difference between certification programs versus getting a graduate degree. Any quick thoughts on that? Postgraduate data science certification programs versus graduate degrees in data science.
As far as learning the right tools and searching for jobs after as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think overall, and this is just my perspective here, overall, having a graduate degree on your resume is stronger than having a certification. Or just in general, if as a recruiter, when I'm picking some resumes, if everything else is same, but one person has done a full-fledged master's in data science versus a graduation, the full-fledged master's just gives me better sense of how much time, how much theory, how much of things like internship the candidate would have done. But this is just my perspective. Somebody else can have different point of view here as well.
Right, because Google, I just saw an article, Google is having a new certification in data science, and they're getting companies to pledge to make hires as well.
I agree that, I mean, I don't know much, to be honest, I don't know much about what the certifications are, but my impression is that they're more tailored towards like learning the tools and less about learning like the first principles of data science. So you're probably not going to get into much of the statistics or, maybe learn, linear algebra or things like that. I mean, if you come from a STEM degree, you're probably going to know that anyway, or maybe at least some of it. But I think using that in the sense of data science or how it is applicable to data science or, where it's used is important. I mean, that's just my impression. There might be some certifications out there that kind of cover the whole, first principles all the way to tools, but I think you probably would get that better in a graduate program.
Yeah, I generally agree that like if I had two candidates, all else equals, one has a graduate degree, one has a certification, maybe, depending on how the interview goes, I might err on the side of the graduate degree because I know they spent like a year or two, right? Like learning this really well. However, I know that, maybe not a lot of people have the opportunity to, attend a graduate degree program. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of time and commitment. So when I have reviewed candidates who have certifications, I think, some of them have really cool projects that they do on the side or with the program, right? So I think like that doesn't fully make up for a 2-year degree, but like if they show that they're very interested and they have lots of side projects, they have like a Git repository I can go look at, like I think that doesn't deter me, at least from like talking to a candidate and see what they know.
Thank you. Here's a question for all the panelists. In your experience searching for jobs, have you found that companies are generally looking for knowledge/experience both in data science and the field the role is in, like finance, manufacturing, medicine, etc., or are the data science skills alone enough?
So I generally looked for the kind of niche that I ended up falling into, which was manufacturing. So a lot of them already wanted experience in that. I can't speak for like a tech company. I would expect one to be a little bit more open about the types of experience that one would need. But I think it depends on the company for sure. Even for now, like I happen to fall into that, but if I saw a really great candidate that had no manufacturing experience, I certainly wouldn't, overlook that person. So, yeah, it comes down to the team, I guess, is what I'd say.
I think, so I've taken many interviews at Amazon and Facebook as well. Most of the time, what we are looking for is candidates with good understanding of statistics, good understanding of data science, and somebody who is good in critical thinking and problem solving rather than knowing the domain itself. So pretty much if you look at LinkedIn profile of a lot of folks who are working in some of these big tech corporates, they come from very different backgrounds. Not a lot of them come from very similar domain with their experience. So I think based on, especially big firms, when we talk about it, it's pretty flexible. You don't need to have very specific experience in that domain, and firms are open to pick good candidates.
I generally agree with like big companies that hire like, hundreds of data scientists like a year, that a lot of times you come in and you interview for a data science role, but not specific what team a lot of the time. So you might be working on like Google Maps, or you might be working for a Google, like, more like B2C type of product. So like that's different skill sets, right? And not different skill sets, like different industries. So generally it's, data science is very transferable. I would caveat though, like if you're, interviewing for a manager role or at a higher level role, it might get more and more difficult because they generally hire for people who have, industry knowledge, or prefer people with industry knowledge as you go up the ranks.
Okay, I'm going to throw out here kind of 3 quick questions rolled into one here. So the first is just sort of the value of PhD over above and beyond a master's in this field. The second has to do with data scientists versus data integrators. And the third is applications to cybersecurity. Any thoughts on any of those?
The first one, as far as PhD goes, if you want to do research, I imagine that's probably why you got a PhD to begin with, or are pursuing one. Then, not all data science positions will offer like machine learning research types of things. They're still very business rooted. So, in my experience, it really comes down to what's going to drive value for the business. So, and oftentimes that's not necessarily what the next generation of some algorithm is. At least not yet. It might be at some point, but most of the time there's a lot of low hanging fruit, which is kind of what we pick up, what I pick up. You definitely be successful in a role, but I don't know about what that would mean as far as qualifications. I'm not sure what a data integrator is, so I can't speak to that. And I'm not sure, what was the last question? Cybersecurity?
Yes.
Okay.
To cybersecurity.
Actually, our company, they're pretty cybersecurity focused. They have a lot of IP and whatnot. So so that's kind of an interesting topic. It's one that I've had with a lot of the cybersecurity people in our company around pretty much just monitoring traffic and you know how we could detect threats in real time. I've never actually worked on actual, you know, gotten into the weeds. I've just talked at a high level about it, but I certainly know that is a domain that's pretty ripe for data science.
I could just add one point on the PhD part. So I think in industry, as Andrew mentioned, for data science role, you don't necessarily need PhD. But there are roles like applied scientist or research scientist, where a lot of application of research that you do in PhD gets used. So it might be worth searching for those roles as well, where preferred qualification is PhD candidates, or even minimum qualification is PhD candidates. And there are a lot of research scientists and applied scientist role available in the industry.
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of there's just a variety of roles, but I think in general the trend I see is like, you know, the question is if you want to, you know, build models out of the box and maybe do some tuning, you don't need a PhD for that, right? But for roles where you're the one creating like the newest algorithms, where like, you know, like at Google we have like I guess Alphabet, there's like a group called DeepMind, right? They're actually creating like TensorFlow, like what you're using. Right. So if you want to do that level of, you know, development, maybe you need a PhD. So I'd consider like, what type of data science do you want to do? And most of them don't need a PhD.
Nice. Mark just asked, how do you juxtapose your role as data scientist to that of data engineering? That is, do you find yourself doing more data engineering as a data science? If so, what do you think is the reason?
I find myself in that position pretty often. It's primarily because we don't really have like real infrastructure for data set up. So most of the time we're kind of scrambling to put data sets together. We also don't really have a big team. So we have, I think, one data engineer on our team. So that's probably the reason for that. But yeah, I spend more time than I'd like, I guess, you know, collecting data and, you know, integrating it into a data set. So, I mean, that's my experience. I'm sure there are more distinct roles in more mature companies that, you know, already have a nice infrastructure of data, where a data scientist can do more of the pure, you know, data science stuff and not have to worry too much about, you know, engineering and whatnot. So yeah, my experience though.
I agree as well. Like larger companies have like hundreds of headcount, so they're like, they can specialize to everyone, right? Whereas like for smaller companies, like a data scientist will do like engineering work. And a lot of times because like, you know, there's software engineers, there's data scientists, data engineers kind of in the middle, right? And it's kind of like, you know, you need data intuition to do a lot of like the ETL, like the engineering part, right? So instead of having a software engineer do the data engineering work, sometimes it's the data scientist, because you know the data maybe a lot better than the software engineer. So they have to, I guess I agree generally that data science is very vague and broad, and that's what makes it interesting.
And just to add to that, as both of you mentioned, Andrew and Byu, in bigger companies, there are dedicated data engineering teams. So a lot of times data scientists will have to wear a hat of data engineer. But in plenty of occasions, you'll just hand over some of the specific data engineering tasks to dedicated data engineering team, and you yourself will focus on data science only.
Okay. All right. So we're very close to the end of our time. So on that note, I do want to